I just wanted to touch on this. You know, I mentioned it before, but I will mention it again. I've tweeted about it a little bit. So there's one communist organization. It's left over from the new communist movement of the 1970s. It's called the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP. And since the since the Nixon administration, their strategy has been to try and build a protest movement against Republican presidents. And they, you know, during the time when Nixon was being impeached, they formed the Workers' Committee to throw the bum out, and they had protests calling for Nixon to be impeached. And when Reagan was president, they had no business as usual, and they eventually formed Refuse and Resist. And when Bush was president, when I was around them, they had The World Can't Wait, drive out the Bush regime. And now they have Refuse Fascism, right? And they're calling Trump a fascist. And, you know, this is what the RCP has done for a long time. And they get ads in the New York Times that they have a whole lot of celebrities sign, and they have protests. And so they're trying to just run an anti-Trump protest movement, except they keep getting canceled. They keep getting canceled. Because the woke left doesn't like them. They don't appreciate them. They're Maoist communists, right? And that, you know, they in the past have made clear they don't support cross-dressing. They feel that cross-dressing is offensive to women. You know, they historically have been, you know, not in favor of LGBT rights. You know, and they're Maoist communists, and so they are canceled, and they are labeled a cult. And whenever they have a rally in Los Angeles, you know, to drive out Trump, then the anti-cult people will show up, and just like they did to us in Minneapolis. And what frustrates me is that the RCP continues pandering, just pandering endlessly to the anti-Trump people, when the anti-Trump people hate them, because the fight against Trump is a fight to defend liberalism. As bad as Trump has been, they see Trump as potentially negotiating peace with Russia. They see Trump as potentially illiberal, as potentially being a Bonapartist who will change things. And the anti-Trump movement is coming from a bad place. It's not that Trump is good. I mean, Trump has been awful. He bombed Iran. He, you know, he hasn't made peace with Russia. He's violated the free speech rights of pro-Palestinian protesters, the ICE stuff. Trump is awful in a lot of ways, but the anti-Trump movement thinks Trump is not war hawkish enough. The anti-Trump movement thinks that the government should be allowed to silence people on the internet because they claim it's disinformation, right? You know, and you just, you know, as somebody who is an RT journalist, go to one of these anti-Trump rallies and see the response that they have to anyone who is sympathetic to Russia. These people want to kill you if you're pro-Russia. Right? The anti-Trump movement is a defense of American liberalism, right? They're comparing Trump to Kim Jong-un. They're comparing Trump to Putin. You know, the anti-Trump movement is the imperialists who feel Trump might work against the overall interests of imperialism. But yet the RCP, they have it in their head, you know, Republicans good, Democrats bad. That's what they think, or, you know, Republicans bad, Democrats good. They won't say Democrats good, but that's what they mean. And that this has been their hustle, you know, for decades, is forming some kind of hysterical, over the top, we're all going to die, we're all going to be put in camps, it's Hitler, we're Nazis, you know, and this has been their thing. And they did it during the Bush years, and they did it during the Reagan years, and they're doing it now under the Trump administration. And it's funny because after Bush left office, they admitted that Obama was worse than Bush. Right? They said as bad as Bush was, Obama is worse. But yet they didn't have a hysterical campaign to drive out Obama. But yet as soon as Trump got in, it was refusefascism.org, etc. But regardless, they pander endlessly to the woke crowd. You know, they are convinced that these woke people, you know, are all going to become, you know, RCP if they just pander hard and repeat their hysterical Trump derangement syndrome loud enough. But they don't. And after Roe versus Wade was overturned, the RCP, you know, Samsara Taylor, who's their leader at this point, their leader, their national, like their you know, big leader is Bob Avakian, but he's 82. You know, he's not doing much these days. He's, you know, in his 80s. But Samsara Taylor, who we're going to show here in a minute, we're going to show a couple of her videos. She has been She's their main spokesperson, and she's a very pro-abortion activist. And so she organized some very effective pro-abortion rallies. And AOC spoke at one of those rallies. And after that, they got canceled like you wouldn't believe. The Intercept did a hit piece on them. The Daily Beast did a hit piece on them. NBC, MSNBC demonized them as a cult. They've just been smeared. And it continues. Rolling Stone did a smear piece on the RCP, just last week. And Rolling Stone magazine, this is a liberal magazine that hates Trump, but they did an article like, you can hate Trump, but don't get involved with RCP because they're a cult. And it's like, because they're illiberal. Now, I maintain that the RCP is very much a front for French intelligence, that they are assets of French intelligence. And I wrote a book called Letter to Bob Avakian, where I made that, I kind of laid that out, and I basically critiqued their line. I've gone into great detail. I think the RCP is an interesting case study because if you go back to the 1970s, they were very much on the right track with out of the movement to the masses, you could call it, right? They very much had the approach of, let's try to not be leftists and let's try to build like a populist working class movement, but they lost it, right? They lost it, sadly. And, it just didn't work. And this is the book that I wrote, and it's just kind of I go over the history of RCP, and I go into great detail. I talk about them being canceled after the Roe versus Wade ruling. I wrote Letter to Bob Avakian, and honestly, it's one of my best pieces. It's not very widely read. I've had books that have sold hundreds or thousands more copies than this, but if you want to know, one great way to articulate what you think and to explain your own beliefs is to contrast them with someone else's. So by contrasting my beliefs with Bob Avakian's, by critiquing the RCP, by praising the good work they've done and what they did in the 1970s and highlighting their achievements, I was able to actually write a very effective piece. I wrote this book, Letter to Bob Avakian, and I hope people will read it. It's one of my better pieces. But anyhow, in the book, I critiqued them for their Trump derangement syndrome, for their obsessive atheism, their hostility to any belief in God. I critiqued them pretty fairly, while at the same time acknowledging their achievements, etc. And I think it's a good piece. But anyway, I'm going to put on Sunsara Taylor, and this is Sunsara responding to them being called a cult, being accused of being a cult, being smeared by Rolling Stone magazine. We're going to react to Sunsara's videos. It's a two-part video Sunsara Taylor made reacting to Rolling Stone magazine.
Spent hours being interviewed for a Rolling Stone article that was supposed to be about Refuse Fascism, the one organization that for 9 years has recognized that Trump is fascist.
Now, right there, so they interviewed her for 9 hours. You know what that meant? They were trying to get the quotes they needed. Right? They had already decided they were going to write a smear piece. They'd already decided they were going to defame, her, but they needed to get quotes from her that they could use, and so they kept probably asking her the same questions over and over and over again. They kept probably trying to push her to frame things a certain way. They were trying to get her to say things that they could print out of context. That's the way smear hack journalists work, right? So the fact that they gave her this long interview, right? I'm happy to talk to the press. I've talked to the press before. I've been interviewed, but I've noticed if people keep asking me the same question over and over again, it's not a good sign because they want you to say it in a certain way so they can take it out of context. I saw that at the UN, for example, right? When President Rouhani came to the United Nations after Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, had gotten out of office, then Rouhani came in, and they asked Rouhani, did the Holocaust happen? They asked him that about 17 times on the day he was at the United Nations. Why? Because they wanted him to stutter or answer it in a way where they could frame him as a Holocaust denier. And every time President Rouhani of Iran gave the same answer. He said, yes, the Holocaust happened, but it doesn't justify what Israel does. But they were hoping that he would just stutter or say it. And whenever gutter, smear hack journalists, when they interview for hours and hours, and they just keep repeating the same question because they want you to finally say it in a way that they can take it out of context or distort your image. So it's good that she pointed that out, right? They didn't have to interview her for hours to write this short article in Rolling Stone, but they had been assigned to do a smear piece, probably because the RCP is French intelligence connected, right? They don't trust them, the RCP, and they're illiberal. They're an illiberal organization, right? They come out of Marxism, Leninism. They're Maoist communists or whatever. So they've been assigned to defame them. And so they did it, right? And this is how the Cult Awareness Network and, sloppy, disgusting, smear journalists work, right? So it's good that she mentioned they interviewed her for hours and then they published an article. It's just a couple pages long.
It has united people from diverse perspectives and called on millions to non-violently drive this regime from power.
No, you haven't united people from diverse perspectives. Look, I've been at, our Refuse Fascism events. It's just liberals. It's just a bunch of liberals. And in fact, Refuse Fascism, it doesn't have leftists, right? If you go to like a Palestine rally, you got a little bit more, of kind of, socialistic, it's all wokeified, but you still have a little bit more. But you go to RCP rallies, it's just kind of your typical, TV watching MSNBC, CNN fan who thinks Trump is Hitler, being directed. It's like a mob of liberals being directed by RCP members. So, that's what diverse perspectives. No, that's just wrong. Sorry, Sincera. I've been to your rallies, and, I would say there's more diverse perspectives at like a Black Lives Matter rally or at a pro-Palestine rally, but your rallies tend to just be liberals because the message is Trump bad, orange man bad, orange man Hitler, drive out Trump. It's like you're basically just, doing CNN in the street. I mean, it's basically just an episode of Rachel Maddow in IRL. It's an IRL, cosplay of Rachel Maddow. So you're wrong there, Sincera.
But David Peisner, the author, didn't focus on this. And so I'm not just disappointed, I am pissed off because whatever his intentions, Peisner's article seems determined to put a lid on any chance humanity has to get free of its current nightmare.
No, it doesn't. He wants you to go to No Kings, right? If you want to drive out Trump, go to a No Kings rally, right? And Keith Ellison will be there and all the Democrats. Basically, the RCP running their own version of No Kings is not making a political contribution in any way, right? And imagine if you were just a Democrat, you're just a Democrat, you just hate Trump, you believe CNN, and you just want to drive out Trump. Are you going to join a group run by Maoist communists? Are you going to join a group run by Democrats? No Kings. Well, of course, you're going to join George Soros and No Kings, right? And that's what they don't get, right? That the Democrats at this point are the establishment, right? And Trump, as bad as he is, there's an anti-establishment edge to him. And there's a populism, a populist demagogy that Trump is associated with. He had people like Tucker Carlson campaigning for him. He's got Tulsi Gabbard as his intelligence director, even though it looks like they're trying to drive her out. She seems to be the only force within the Trump administration trying to restrain the war hawkishness of Marco Rubio. And, if you do stop Trump hysterics, number one, there's nothing unique about your message. Calling Trump Hitler, this hysterical anti-Trump stuff, there's nothing unique about it, number one. But number two, why should people join you? They can just join the Democrats. They just join No Kings, right?
Out of his way to repeatedly smear a revolutionary leader who not only has refused to give up on revolution over decades, but has put himself to the biggest problems humanity has come up against in trying to get free the world over. I am talking about Bob Avakian, the architect of the new communism. Yes, a whole new framework for human emancipation, forged on a thoroughly scientific foundation, a game changer for humanity.
Well, I mean, I have my whole critique of Avakian's ideas, which I get into in my book. He doesn't talk about economics, right? He thinks you can be a communist in this kind of idealist sense, right? And that Avakian basically, he views communism as a woke dictatorship, right? We'll have a government that will impose our anti-racist, anti-sexist, egalitarian ideas. He's abandoned the economics of Marxism. And so, of course, he doesn't understand Deng Xiaoping theory. He doesn't understand socialism of the 21st century, like in Venezuela. He doesn't understand geopolitics, and he denounces all the existing communist governments and all the anti-imperialist states And he just, the only communism he supports is in his head. And, you know, I have a big critique of his line. And it's largely just kind of moving away from the economics of Marxism and just embracing that spiritual aesthetic of rebellion and kind of this hysterical, you know, opposition to Republicans and kind of cultural anger at the United States. He wasn't always like this. And again, if you read my stuff, I talk a little bit about his deterioration. I actually do talk about him a little bit in Mystical Stalinism. But anyway, let Sansara continue.
There's articles smear and try to distance people from this. One way is by trying to drive a huge anti-communist wedge through the middle of the beautiful breadth of unity Refuse Fascism has forged. Listen to this. Refuse Fascism has been ready for years to meet this moment, but have its ties to a former 1960s radical become an albatross? Peisner is begrudgingly acknowledging that Refuse Fascism has been ahead of the curve and has a strategy that could actually work.
No. What he's saying is basically the ruling class, the U.S. government, the elite in America are fomenting anti-Trump hysteria. They're scared that RCP, which is tied to French intelligence, which is an illiberal organization, they're scared that RCP might recruit out of it. So they're running a smear piece to make sure that liberals join No Kings and don't join their version of it, their knockoff of it. And it's going to work, right? Because again, you don't need the RCP to oppose Trump. Opposing Trump grows on trees right now. Opposing Trump is the mainstream opinion. Opposing Trump puts you in line with all the major corporations in America. Opposing Trump puts you in line with all the mainstream TV networks. Like half of Fox News even opposes Trump, right? So opposing Trump is nothing revolutionary about it at all. You don't need the RCP to do it. So they're making sure that the RCP doesn't recruit out of the anti-Trump hysteria the ruling class is fomenting for their own reasons to defend their own system right now. That's all this is.
Just that its association with Revcoms like myself who follow the revolutionary leader Bob Avakian is what's holding millions back from taking up Refuse Fascism strategy. Well, if that were true, then where are all the other organizations and millions of people rising up who are not associated with us demanding the removal of the regime?
Everywhere. No Kings. I mean, yeah, there's people protesting Trump every goddamn day in this country. Like, Are you smoking? I mean, does she live in an alternate reality? Like, where are they? I mean, people are in the streets against Trump every goddamn day.
I don't see them. I see a lot of beautiful, selfless resistance to ICE, which is important and needs to go further. I see other forms of protest, but I do not yet see a movement to oust this regime.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I see it. It's called No Kings. It's called No Kings. It's called Rachel Maddow's Hour on MSNBC every night. It's called, you know, the articles of impeachment that they're filing. They're constantly trying to get a vote to impeach. Trump has been impeached more than any other president in American history.
And the reason for that is not because communists have been working hard for this and others in Refuse Fascism have been mobilizing for it. It's because the millions of people in this country who hate what's happening don't yet grasp the full danger of fascism. And
yes, they do. Yes, they do. The idea that we're all going to die from Trump because he's friends with Russia, because he uses naughty racist words, because, you know, yeah, we get it, right? Again, lots of people are having Trump derangement syndrome, not just you.
What is required of them to remove it from power? And on a deeper level, the very fact that Refuse Fascism has been ahead of the curve has a lot to do with the involvement of Revcoms, who takes seriously Bob Avakian's work. Bob Avakian has been analyzing the rise of fascism.
See, and this is, again, it's Khrushchevism, right? You know, they very much follow a leader, right? They're an illiberal movement that, you know, promotes a leader, right? I don't think he's a very good one. He's not the deepest guy, and I think he's wrong about a lot, but this is what scares them, right? You know, they see in Bob Avakian, they see Abraham Lincoln potentially. They see Putin. They see Xi Jinping. They see a strong leader building a mass movement, and that is illiberalism. And they are, you know, the ruling class are Khrushchevites. And so even in their anti-Trump hysteria, they're not going to allow an illiberal movement that glorifies and celebrates some kind of leader. They're just not going to allow it.
this country warning of it for over 30 years, including the Christian fascism, including the deep roots of this fascism in American white supremacy and
and that's the thing, right? This pamphlet that they wrote back in 2005 that went viral when Alex Jones took a picture of it is talking about Bush. There are huge differences. The political scene has changed so much since 2005, but they are following a 2005 script of evangelical Christians want to take us, want to attack Muslims and invade countries. There's a whole non-neoconservative right now. There's all kinds of people who voted for Trump because they wanted him to end the wars. There's all kinds of people. There's the dissident MAGA, like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker. You're hacking an old script. Bush and Trump, there are similarities in how they govern. Absolutely. They're governing in a very similar way, but the rhetoric and the appeal is almost completely opposite. Bush was defending the status quo. Trump is claiming he's going to, drain the swamp and end the wars and overturn the status quo. If you're using a script, from the 2005 to explain Trump, you're way behind.
And expansionist plunder all over the world. And Bob Avakian has thoroughly exposed why the Democratic Party will not and cannot lead the fight to defeat this fascism.
But they are. Yeah, they're doing it. They sound just like you. And if you're running a campaign of hysteria, against Trump, you are serving the Democratic Party, right? You admit that, right? Just admit it, right? Say you're in a popular front with the Democrats, but that's what you're doing. And again, you yourself, Sincera, made articles and made videos saying that as bad as Bush was, Obama was worse. But where was the hysterical drive out Obama campaign, right? If you're not aligned with the Democrats, where was the drive out Obama campaign? If Obama was worse than Bush, because it's cultural, and it's probably ethnic, right? I know Bob Avakian is Armenian, but it's probably ethnic, right? More than anything. But, we'll get more into it.
Why it's on us. All of this mattered. All of this was instrumental in why I, together with Andy Z, took a key role in initiating Refuse Fascism 9 years ago, together with, yes, others from other perspectives. And that breadth and that unity matters. And it is strengthened by the perspective of followers of Bob Avakian, not weakened by it. In my next video, I'm going to take on Peisner's suggestion that Bob Avakian is some kind of enigmatic cult leader. I'll be back.
Yeah, and this kind of stuff is important to pay attention to because there is a network of spooks that stalk illiberal organizations, right? I mean, it's Steve Hassan and the Cult Awareness Network, but the RCP, whenever they have one of their Refuse Fascism rallies, people show up with hoods over their faces and hand out, this is a cult, this is a cult. Just like CPI, when we had our event in Minneapolis, people, outside were screaming about this is a cult. There's a network of spooks that targets illiberal organizations and groups that are potentially anti-imperialist or just not controlled by American intelligence, right? Basically, I mean, RCP's message might sound like no kings, but they're French aligned and they're an illiberal formation. So they're targeted in the same way. And that's why I'm going over this. I want you all to see this, right? But I also want you to understand that that there's no point in doing this. What they're doing, they're not going to have much success because liberals don't need them. But anyway, here we're going to continue with Sincera. This is part 2 of her video.
And fight fascism, but don't look under the hood of the system that gave it to you and stay away from the revolutionary leader who has a serious way out. That's the take-home message in David Peisner's recent Rolling Stone article. After giving a nod to the work of Refuse Fascism, he spends half his article smearing the revolutionary thinker who helped inspire that work, Bob Avakian. Not his ideas, him. Peisner actually suggests that Bob Avakian is the head of a, quote, moribund cult of leftist cranks. And to prove this, Peisner seeks out some actual leftist cranks, people who gave up on revolution years ago if they ever believed in it, people who are hostile to Bob Avakian because he has refused to give up. People like Max Albaum, who wrote a whole book smearing the most revolutionary parts of the 1960s and another book about how to win elections under this system.
Now, that's interesting. I've quoted Max Albaum and his book, Revolution in the Air. I mean, it's an interesting history of the 1960s and 70s New Communist movement. And I mean, I quote him in my book on the New Communist movement. I mean, I don't agree with his conclusions. He kind of glorifies Democratic Socialists of America and says that basically the new communist movement going into DSA was an improvement. But at the same time, isn't it shitty that like Max Elbaum is another guy who comes out of Maoist communism? He was a leader of the October League, which was another Maoist communist group that was like a rival. And he goes to Rolling Stone and talks trash against the RCP. That's pretty shitty, right? And they're on the same side. They both have Trump derangement syndrome. They both want to drive out Trump. But this is, again, Max Elbaum is an academic. He's a liberal academic now. He's part of the system. RCP is still building an illiberal organization. And so because of that, Max Elbaum is part of the club. He's getting an academic check. He's writing books about, the history of communism in the 60s. And RCP is still out there building a group, right? And so they're a threat. And this is the thing. And notice that no matter how hard RCP panders and repeats the anti-Trump hysteria and all that, they still get canceled because there is no room for an illiberal organization. The deep state opposes illiberal organizations and is going to try and crush them, right? Just like they're trying to crush the Church of Scientology right now, just like they've been trying to crush the Unification Church for years, just like that any illiberal formation of people giving the whole of their lives for a movement, right? That's what Lenin talked about, right? Give the whole of your lives, party of new type. Anyone who's building a serious movement aimed at like taking power and changing society is going to be targeted in this way. However, a lot of the people that are rallying behind Trump, even though Trump has been awful, are looking for that kind of movement, whereas a lot of the people that are woke liberals are the most susceptible to this kind of message of Khrushchevism, et cetera. And that's what they don't seem to get. But here we go.
In contrast, Bob Avakian has spent decades working on the problem of making an actual revolution and emancipating humanity. Avakian has gone deeply into and studied humanity's first great attempts at making revolution and getting free in the Soviet Union and in China before those revolutions were reversed.
Well, and I will say, if you read my letter to Bob Avakian, one of my critiques of his ideology is that he says things that are just nonsensical. I mean, one of their beliefs is that when Khrushchev came to power, and after the death of Stalin, that the Soviet Union became capitalist immediately. Well, there was no change in the economy, right? The means of production continued to operate according to a central plan. They had a leader that was basically working against them, but the economic foundations didn't change. And that's just a nonsensical thing. And that was the line of the Gang of Four, and that was the line of China in the 70s. And so they just kind of repeat it. And a lot of what Bob Avakian says about the Soviet Union and about China is just not economic at all. There's no economic analysis. It's this very subjective, is it liberatory? Is it marching us toward, it's very, very wrong. But is he wrong to have continued engaging with it? No. I mean, and that's the thing. I don't hate the RCP. I think the RCP is a complicated group and they're being unfairly targeted right now, but they're not learning from that they're on the wrong side. Right? Liberalism is in desperation to preserve itself right now because the American people are angry. And a lot of the people who want things to change in this country rallied around Trump wrongly. Trump is awful. And Dissident MAGA, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, there is a layer of people who are anti-imperialist who really want a government that works for the American people and not for Wall Street and this global international system. And that's where we need to go. But pandering to woke people doesn't protect you from them. They're still going to cancel you. And trust me, I tried to be on the left, right? But you can't, right? You can have a sensible conversation with conservatives because they're at odds with the liberal order. The left are not. But anyway, we continue.
Avakian has deeply studied the liberating accomplishments and lessons of those revolutions, and he's looked unsparingly at their shortcomings and even their grievous errors. And he's learned from broader developments in human understanding and brought this together in forging a new synthesis of communism. Bob Avakian's written a constitution for the new socialist republic in North America, operationalizing this. How we'd build a radically new economy based on meeting people's needs, serving the world revolution, caring for the environment, and how on that foundation we'll go to work at overcoming all the scars of millennia of living in class-divided society, of men oppressing women, of gender oppression generally, of white supremacy and one nation dominating others, and the contradiction between those who've been trained to work with their minds and the millions and billions who've been locked out of that.
And again, right, on the one hand, he's wrong about a lot of what he says, but there's nothing wrong with him talking about it. And you can find my critique there. Like what she just talked about there about breaking down the division between mental and manual labor. What Marx wrote about was that capitalism is constantly replacing human labor power with machines. And it has this problem of poverty created by abundance, poverty amid plenty. But with a rationally planned economy, you can create abundance, and you can create a vast abundance. And then that will lead to everyone being pretty much equal because of the fact that that there's enough for all, and that technology continuing to advance with the amount of work that human beings have to do being very, very little, there won't be any division between mental and manual labor. And if you read what Marx wrote in the critique of the Goethe program, right? They talk about the four alls, right? And that's a big Maoist thing, the four alls. But if you actually read what Marx wrote, where that comes from in the critique of the Goethe program, he's talking about how rationally planning and organizing the means of production can create vast abundance, right? The only way you can create equality is with abundance. You cannot create equality in poverty. And that's why the Cultural Revolution didn't work, right? That China was deeply poor, and you can't make everyone equal in poverty, right? And that was a problem that the entire communist movement had in the 20th century. That the goal, the communism or Marxism, the goal was to have a rationally organized economy to eradicate scarcity, to eradicate poverty, so there was abundance for all. And that's what she doesn't get, and Bob Avakian doesn't get. They are all just very, very subjective. It's all just, well, we just got to do the right thing and make everyone equal. And they've separated from the economics. And Avakian, in his autobiography, spends a lot of time saying his greatest achievement is when he broke with the economists. He had a big revelation at a Jimmy Buffett concert and all of this. So I critique his line, but he's not wrong for talking about these ideas, right? And that doesn't make him bad, and that doesn't make it a cult. So they're being unfairly targeted, but their political line is wrong. Continue.
All of this will take place in the context of a country and a government that is not just protecting, but unleashing debate, dissent, protest, and contestation over the way forward, an unprecedented approach to emancipating humanity and a different way to live. Now, Peisner would have you...
That's all word salad, by the way.
Believe that any...
Right, that's word salad, an emancipating approach, this whole new, that's word salad.
Discussion of the significance of this for humanity. Any claim that this is a really big breakthrough that everybody needs to know about is just hero worship, religious blind faith, and cultism. But how would...
Yeah, that's the Khrushchevist narrative. There are no great leaders, that joining a mass movement makes you a fool and a sucker, that all we can do is just kind of live normal lives, live biologically and vote or whatever, right? And so again, they're being unfairly targeted, and they hate Bob Avakian for the same reason they hate Trump, right? And Bob Avakian hasn't done great stuff. He's not a great guy. But at the same time, they see in him the same thing they see in Trump, the potential for some kind of mass movement. So that's why your group is being defamed.
Did he know? Peisner uses Bob Avakian's name 30 times in this article. He mentions that Bob Avakian's written a dozen books, but he doesn't engage it.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point. And cult smear pieces, the Cult Awareness Network pieces, they never talk about the ideas or the principles. It's always just rumors, gossip. I used to be in this group and somebody was mean to me, and they never engage with the ideas. And that is a really good point, right? This group is led by this guy, Bob Avakian. This guy has his own interpretation of communism, and they're not going to talk about that and what he actually stands for. Instead, they're going to talk about, who shook hands with who, or who got their feelings hurt, or who said what, or, and that's a really good point, because the last thing they ever want anyone reading that piece to do is actually go read this guy's work, because the whole piece is being set up to make sure that as the establishment whips up stop Trump hysteria, none of the people that get involved in it join this illiberal communist faction, right? That's the point.
Single word about its content. That's not serious journalism. That's trying to scare you away. Its message: don't go deeper, don't look into this, stay in bounds of the system. Now, I don't know what's in Peisner's heart and his intent, but I do know this. There are a lot of people who don't like what's going on, but are kind of happy to believe that there's nothing they really can do about it, because then they can stay in their comfort zone.
Yeah. That's the truth. And that's the kind of people that are joining the anti-Trump movement, is people who are not happy about how things are going on, but believe that if you become an activist and if you give your life to a movement, then you're in a cult, then you're brainwashed and all of this. I mean, yeah, you're talking about the mainstream of anti-Trumpism. And again, why do they need you, right? I mean, if you think Trump is Hitler, right, are you going to, and you just want to protest Trump, are you going to join No Kings or some group led by Maoist communists? You're going to join the Democrats, right? You're going to join No Kings. I mean, you're pandering to the wrong side, right? People that are against the status quo in America are in the Trump camp. Now, at this point, a lot of them are very critical of Trump, like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Candace Owens, Thomas Massey. There's a lot of people in the Trump camp who are angry about the fact that he's continued the wars, that he's, cracked down on civil liberties, etc. And that dissident MAGA, that's where the hope is right now. The people who voted for Trump because of the good things he said and are mad they didn't get him. They're not, just worshipers of Trump. They wanted, what Trump promised and they didn't get it. That's where the hope is. The Stop Trump movement is a dead end. And these kind of attacks they're leveling against you are coming from the same place, the exact same place the attacks on Trump are coming from.
And so they don't really want to know about, and they don't want you to know about, a real and serious radical alternative. I'm not telling you to take up Bob Avakian's work because I say so. I'm saying look into it. Consider it. Go deeply into it, because there is something profound here. It is new, and it matters profoundly to humanity's future. So if your concern about what humanity is facing is greater than your desire to stay in your comfort zone as all of it goes to shit, then seriously look into the work Bob Avakian has done at Bob Avakian Official. Find out for yourself. Don't be scared away.
Yeah. One thing I will say about the RCP, one of the most unhealthy things about them is that they fixate on atheism, right? They are obsessively atheist. Most communist groups tend to be atheistic. Karl Marx was a dialectical materialist, but the RCP is just so insistent on atheism. They've gone out of their way to be offensive with their atheism. And again, they don't seem to understand that if you're saying, that believing in God is a bad thing, that now extrapolates to joining a mass movement as a bad thing, right? It's weird. The reason they call them the new atheist movement, and they were new, right? Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Bill Maher and Sam something. I can't even remember his name. He wrote Letter to a Christian Nation, Sam something or other. All of those guys were new in that during the Cold War, atheism was associated with communism. That generally people were calling themselves atheists, saying that there's no God. It was assumed that they were communists. But Ayn Rand, the objectivist, she was an atheist, and she was a worshiper of capitalism. And she was opposed to Christianity because she said that it, caused people to be nice to each other, basically. She called it the guilt-peddling Jesus industry. And she said, I swear allegiance only to myself and all of that. And that she was kind of an outlier because most people on the right believed in God, and it was communists who didn't believe in God. But after the end of the Cold War, we start to see a kind of a shift. And now, it's very interesting. Maduro, who's now in federal prison, he's Roman Catholic, right? He's the communist leader of Venezuela. The communist leader of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega, is not only a Christian, but the slogan of the government of Nicaragua, I've been there, is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. And they have the strictest anti-abortion laws of any country in the world. The leader of the Russian Communist Party, Gennady Zyuganov, is an Orthodox Christian. He's converted to the Russian Orthodox teaching. And it's complicated, right? I guess that's all I can say. It's complicated. Look, you have the government of Ibrahim Traore, which Ibrahim Traore he doesn't call himself a communist. He was the leader of the Marxist student group at his college when he was in college, but he's a devout Sunni Muslim. And he's the leader of the military of Burkina Faso. And now that he's taken power, he's building up Burkina Faso with a state-run economy. He's building up fisheries, and he's building up, you should read on our website, Penny, a member of CPI, has written, she follows Burkina Faso very, very closely. And she has written a lot about all that he's doing to just raise up the people of Burkina Faso. And he's not calling himself a communist. And is he a communist? I don't know. He studied Marxism, and he certainly likes Russia. He certainly likes China, but he's also a Muslim. He calls himself a Pan-Africanist. Well, what is he? I don't know, but I like that, right? And at one time that would have been called communism, but now, things are all confusing, and he's not an atheist, he's a Muslim. And, so it's all very interesting. So I just wanted to share that with all of you, that the RCP, they're being unfairly targeted, with this cult stuff, but they're kind of setting themselves up for it because they're pandering to liberal hysteria, right? At this point, the liberal order is on the defensive like it's never been. And this Epstein stuff just shows you what the liberal order is about. I mean, the liberal order is on the defensive. People are looking for something to believe in, for some truth to stand for, and what comes next. And so, I don't know, I just wanted to engage with all of that. So